Okay, let's move. This is 1965. It's a film called The Great Race. And it is basically a slapstick comedy by director Blake Edwards. Now, Blake Edwards, at that time, had done Breakfast at Tiffany's, which is a very prominent film. I must do that one day. And the first two of what would be more Pink Panther films. So he'd only done two of the Pink Panther films at this stage. But it was enough to get him a very large budget for this. Blake was a huge fan of silent movies, and this would influence his filmmaking considerably. And that very definitely shows up in this film. As the 20th century began, this is the premise of the film. As the 20th century began, the great Leslie and Professor Fate are both daredevils. And that was quite a thing in those days. So the early few years of the 1900s. The great Leslie is the charming, handsome one, dressed in white, as we see here. And Professor Fate is more of the villain type of character with the twirly moustache. Blake Edwards took inspiration from the real 1908 New York to Paris race. Although he didn't let accuracy get in the way of, he didn't let accuracy impede him at all. This film is not so much based on the New York to Paris race as inspired by the notion that it existed. The great Leslie gets patronage from a car company to build him a car, the Leslie Special, which is a very large white vehicle. Professor Fate built his own, the Hannibal Twin 8, which is almost more of a secret weapon than a car. And among all the other competitors and their cars in the race is a car provided by a newspaper owner, and the driver being Maggie Dubois, a highly attractive photojournalist and suffragette. Now, 7 cars would begin the race had it not been for some dastardly sabotage by Professor Fate via his assistant Maximilian Meen, who was put out of action 4 of the other cars. So we only get 3 cars in the race, really. Adventures begin, mishaps happen, and behind all of this, Professor Fate is trying his best to take advantage of such distractions to sabotage the other remaining contestants. And they find themselves drifting into ice, into Russia, and then into Asia, where they're all kidnapped. A sword fight even occurs later. Then a pie fight. Now, that's very important. In fact, the film bills this as the world's biggest pie fight, and it's in all the promo material for the film. And this is a definite callback by Blake Edwards to those influential silent movies. Now, the real 1908 New York to Paris race went westward across 3 continents and constituted the world's first around-the-world automobile race. The film was dedicated by Blake Edwards to Laurel and Hardy, a very overt homage to... There are many silent movie types of visual gags in the film throughout, lots of slapstick. There are also many visual cliches and shorthand ways of suggesting scenes in a very stereotypical and prefabricated manner that we associate with those films. It even features a parody of The Prisoner of Zenda, featuring mistaken identity of a visitor with the king. Now, the characters of the plot, all of that was a direct influence on Hanna-Barbera's Wacky Races cartoon series. Almost a direct translation. Peter Perfect equals Leslie Gallant III, played by Tony Curtis. Penelope Pitstop equals Maggie Dubois, played by Natalie Wood. And Dick Dastardly equals Professor Fate, played by Jack Lemmon. And the film didn't do as well as expected, mainly because it competed with another 1965 film, similar in concept, Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines. And that was a similar kind of mayhem-based race, only it featured aircraft instead of cars. And it was set in a similar year at the turn of the 20th century. The pie fight in this film, though, in The Great Race, the pie fight actually used 4,000 pies across 5 days. And although many of these were used as set dressing for continuity, and they'd have to, at the end of the day, they'd have to, they'd see where the pies landed and then make them up again by compressing pies against their face to simulate how it was the day before. And they left it over a weekend, and it really smelt terrible when they came back, so they had to fumigate it and then put all the pies back in the same arrangement. And but yeah, Laurel and Hardy in the Battle of the Century, you see, Blake Edwards said, "I want a pie fight like the Battle of the Century," and this pie fight was styled after that. The Battle of the Century, Laurel and Hardy used 3,000 pies in one day of shooting, so you see a lot more pies in the air there. Now, pie fight experts I believe there are pie fight experts, have concluded that the Laurel and Hardy one is superior and that this one didn't quite get the hang of what slapstick is all about. The actors had fun in the pie fight, though. Natalie Wood had a pie hit her open mouth and she almost nearly choked on the filling. Jack Lemmon said, a pie hitting you in the face feels like a ton of cement, and he got knocked out a few times. When Blake Edwards finally shouted, cut, several hundred pies, hidden by members of the cast, flew towards him. So 1965, The Great Race, and